So, this is the third part of the series in which we are discussing analytical reasoning by MK Pandey for various entrance exam like CLAT, AILET, etc. So, we are going to first read through the book and then we are going to understand from my notes. And in this video, we are also going to complete the first chapter. We often see the method of analogy to put forth our arguments. Loosely speaking, analogy is an inference from a resemblance between particular things, events, or occasions that are known to a further known resemblance. For example, we find a fat man jovial, and later, then another fat man, we expect him to jovial too. If we find males more interested in mathematics than females, and if we find males more interested in physics than females, then we expect the males are more interested in astronomy than females. By noting certain resemblance between two set of things, we infer that they must resemble in other respects also. Schematically, where A, B, C, D are many entities and P, Q are any attributes, an analogical argument may be represented by the form A, B, C, D all have attributes P and Q. A, B, C have the attribute R, so D probably have the attribute R. Congress party is in favor of privatization of the economy and so is the BJP. Similarly, the Congress party favors more autonomy for the states and so does the BJP. The Congress oppose Ram temple constructed at dispute site. So BJP will also oppose construction of Ram temple at the site. So we have seen two or three things on which the two parties are similar. But it is not necessary that they will be also have similar opinions on the other things. Like it is very true that we know that BJP is in support of Ram Temple when it was constructed in January in this year. Pakistan and Bangladesh have both lost to India in cricket and kabaddi, so India should defeat them in hockey also. Shares of pharmaceutical industry had shot up last year when special packages was announced for the pharmaceutical sector. This year's special package have been announced for the software sector. So software sector shares should shoot. Casual argument. Casual arguments are one of the commonest ways of arguing. This type of argument tries to relate a cause with a result. It may have many forms. For example, it can have form X is the cause of Y, X has occurred, so Y will occur. Or X is the only cause of Y, Y has occurred, so X must have occurred. Or any other such variety of it. Let us understand it with the help of an example. The city has been facing the problem of waterlogging for 10 days. An outbreak of cholera is being feared. The BJP should win the elections because it has an organized cadre. The cricket match has been abundant, it must have rained. In the foregoing examples, some efforts have been related with some causes. For example, for example, the effects outbreak of cholera and victory in elections are being expected because their causes waterlogging and organized cadre exist. In the last example, it is argued that since the effect abandoning of match has been placed, the cause rains must have occurred. Arguments that are casual in nature may be strong arguments or weak arguments or fallacious arguments. This will depend solely on the degree of certainty that the cause-effect relationship made in the argument holds. In the three examples, if the first two are reasonably good arguments, the third one is fallacious. In the first two, it is seen that the cause does usually lead to effect. In the last example, causing is being predicted because effect has occurred, but the point is that the effect may occur. A match may be abandoned because of other reasons as well. So I have consolidated the information for you, and it basically means that only key it relates cause to the result, and it can be weak or fallacious or strong, depend solely on the degree of relationship between the cause and effect. Salesman's argument. How does a salesman argue? Once a salesman was selling comms on a street. He wanted to convince every interested observer how strong was a stuff which the combo was made of. In his enthusiasm, he ventured to demonstrate unbreakability of the comb by bending it sharply. And then the impossible happened. The comb cracked into two pieces. The salesman looked at the comb after a couple of seconds and then hesitantly readdressed this audience. And now, gentlemen, I would like you to see for yourself how strong and solid the comb is, even from inside. So that is how salesmen argue. They would speak of the advantages, the benefits of their stand. Hence, a salesman argue is one where a conclusion is arrived at because of the advantages, positive points, and the benefits that it leads to. Such arguments, such arguments are the commonest in everyday life. Example: sports will help the students to keep in good health, so it should be made compulsory for colleges. Religion and politics should be kept apart since religious inclusions will be violative of democratic principles. Example: strikes disrupt the normal life of the common man. There should be a ban on strikes. In the above mentioned example, some conclusion or course of action is advised or prohibited because of the advantages or disadvantages of pursuing that or course of action. Thus, sports are to made compulsory because it carries the advantage that will help the students keep in good health. Strikes are being prohibited because they have a negative feature that they disrupt the normal life of the common man. Argument of this argument of this nature can be both weak or strong. It depends upon many factors such as it is it's the advantage disadvantage being talked about actually true. Even it is true, does the suggested course of action to a particularly possible and reasonable policy to follow? We should look at such arguments in greater detail when we discuss the full forcefulness of arguments exclusively. Presently, I would only state that the first example is a weak argument, while the remaining two are strong arguments. Salesman's argument conclusion is arrived because of the advantages or disadvantages. Can be both weak or strong, depends upon advantage, disadvantage being actually true. When it is true, does the suggestive course of action look practically possible and reasonable policy to? This basically means over here, uh, when the conclusion has been reached, the conclusion because of any advantage or disadvantage relates to each other or not. Does it is it possible? It is reasonable? Is it practical? Argument by chronology. Sometimes a conclusion is arrived solely on the basis of the chronological order of some events. Some examples are: I arrived at the house at 10:30 a.m. I rang the call bell and waited. The door opened. A lady welcomed me inside and made me sit on the sofa, taking off my hat and overcoat. I looked at my watch. It was 10:33. I read the newspaper for the next 15 minutes or so and then went inside to see if the lady was has forgotten me. It would be around 10:50 when I entered the room. The murder was committed at about 10:55. Therefore, this man, whose statement is quoted above, must have either committed the murder or seen the act of murder. Television was invented many years after radio, therefore, our television has a technology superior to that of radio. The song Tamma Tamma Loge was released 2 months earlier than Jumma Chumma, so the former could not be a copy of the latter. In all of the following examples, the order of some events, their chronology, is made on the basis of the predicting anything. Thus, I entered the room at 10:50, where a murder was committed at 10:55. So I must have been a part of the crime. So since TV came after radio, TV should be technologically advanced compared to the radio. Similarly, because the release of song X preceded with another of song Y, X could not have been a copy of Y unless elaborately detailed and minutely justified. Arguments of this type are usually unconvincing and weak. All the three arguments above are weak. The second argument could have been strong if it had been added that technology always develops towards more complex subjects. For example, in the first paragraph above, it is assumed that if the man entered the room at 10:50 and if the murder took place at 10:55, then he must have some vital information about the murder. But what about the possibility that he entered the room at 10:50, left at 10:52, came back to the drawing room and was sitting at the drawing room at 10:55 when the murder took place in the ladies' room? Similarly, in example 2, it is assumed that technologically superior objects always come after an inferior object. This may be true 99% of the times, but not always. So, the inference could be questioned here. In the last example, the date of release of two songs is made the basis of the conclusion that one not have been the copy of the other. But what about the date of recording? It might have happened that Jumma Chumma was recorded earlier through release later than the number Tama Tama. In this case, the possibility of copying cannot be ruled out. So, argument based on chronology is nothing but argument based on time that you have usually seen in the crime scene or something. You have mostly seen this type of arguing in CID or any other such show. They are usually weak, as the author says, unless elaborately detailed or minutely justified. The above, then, is a detailed study of the standard ways of argumentation. Although there are many more ways in which arguments are made, these are ones of the commonest type of arguments. Some other ways of argumentation includes argument by negation, argument by force, argument using trappling questions, etc. All these are fallacious ways of argument and should be discussed for fun and nothing more. There must be some friends of yours who prefer these ways of argumentation during discussions. Let look at some examples. Argument by negation. He is not guilty because this is impossible. Argument by force. He is not guilty, accept it or I will break your head. Argument using trappling questions. Suppose I tell you that I always lie. Will you accept this or true or false? Therefore, believe me if I told you that he is not guilty. Argument by challenge. He is not guilty, accept it or prove it that he is guilty. Thus, in this chapter, we have seen how arguments works. We have seen that there are three essential constituents of an argument: premise, assumptions, and conclusion, and these three are related to a particular fashion or logic. Questions on analytical reasoning seeks to test your understanding of all of these aspects. Thus, some common questions are worded as: is this a conclusion true or false? This an assumption of the argument? Is it a strong argument? Does this premise strengthen the main argument or weaken the main argument? We shall study each of these problems separately in subsequent chapters. The realms of the analytical reasoning are very wide and very interesting. Take a look at the book as a journey, and if you take this journey as a dedicated faithful who follows his guide keenly, you will emerge as a master of analytical reasoning. The journey, by the way, has already begun. So that's how we just ended the very first chapter. From this chapter, I don't think the type of arguments will be very beneficial for our preparation for the CLAT and AILETs, but we must read it once, so that's why I've discussed it in the video. Or otherwise, whatever help it can give us to understand analytical reasoning, we've already grasped it. Please subscribe the channel and like the video and comments if you have any doubts.